What about now? Okay. All right. Yeah. You didn't mute the band. Man, do I have to teach them everything? Probably not. All right. So I'm Eloy. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with life. I struggle with myself. I struggle with Burgess. Uh, Not yet. When they get married, then I'll struggle with her too. But I struggle with me in a lot of my past. I struggle with me and myself in my current state. And right now I'm struggling because it's like 72 degrees in this sanctuary and it is hot. And y'all ain't standing on top of these lights, so y'all don't realize what's going on. So I've known this lesson was coming up for a long time. It's a tough one. This is groundbreaking. We've never done one on this. And so I didn't know how to come up with anything. We've always had something we could go off of. This is new territory. So if it tanks, it's on me. Actually, no, if it tanks, it's on somebody else. But it's not going to tank because hopefully tonight we can help somebody that is struggling. But the thing when I was doing the research on this is I've realized that compulsive behavior is a lot like the addictions that we already face because they go hand in hand. And I'm not a therapist. That's what they're over there for. So if I'm wrong, don't beat me up after service, please. So normally Carol's over there. She's taking notes, and she's like, telling me what I did wrong, but she's not here tonight, so. Whew. But I realized in this that we all struggle with some type of compulsive behavior, whether we want to admit it or not. And so I'm going to start off with a scripture out of 1 Corinthians 15 and 33. And it says, "Do not be tricked by false words. Evil company does damage to good behavior." And that one actually literally came to me when I was stressing about getting everything ready today, and I was going over this. Pastor Jeff asked me this morning, "You ready for it?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then I get to work, and I'm getting stressed because I'm thinking about it, trying to read it between different things. And I'm like, man, I want to tweak this, I want to tweak that. That's a little bit of that compulsive nature of me wanting to make it perfect. And it's not ever going to be perfect because I'm not perfect. He's perfect. So hopefully this is as close to perfect as we can ever get. But again, if it tanks, it's not on me. So when I was preparing for this lesson, like I said, I didn't know which direction I wanted to take. There are so many habits we can classify as being compulsive, but I wanted to stay true to our recovery roots. I didn't want to focus too much on the technical, too much on the medical side of it. There is a lot that needs to be done with that, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm not a trained professional, even though in our text message today I was called doctor, and that's far from the truth. If you're in our group message, you understand that. Thank you for laughing, those that did. So hopefully tonight's lesson will help define what a compulsive behavior is and how it affects us in our recovery. Now, to be completely honest with you, I never knew what compulsive meant. I remember growing up that my dad would always call me a compulsive liar, but I never connected those two until doing this lesson. But that's the only extent of that word that I ever knew was what compulsive was. But millions of people suffer from at least one type of compulsive behavior. These behaviors come in many forms, all which can become debilitating or even in some cases dangerous. Common activities that can develop into, there's a fly or a mosquito or something. The only one that's going to be in the sanctuary is going to find me tonight, watch. So if I start swatting, just let me be. So common activities that can develop into compulsions include shopping or hoarding, eating, gambling, sex, even exercise can be compulsive. And that's why I don't go to the gym, because I don't want to have a compulsive behavior in the gym. I'm kidding. Actually, I did go to the gym this morning for the first time in like a week, and I struggled every minute that I was there. Though some behaviors are easier to overindulge in than others, in reality, nearly any behavior has the potential to become a compulsion. There are also obsessive compulsions, which can be a compulsive person, or in which a compulsive person performs certain behaviors to relieve an underlying anxiety or negative emotion. Like, have you ever seen those people that always have to constantly wash their hands, or they're always like wiping themselves down with like the wipes or whatever like that? That can become compulsive. I really struggled with including a lot of that in there because it just gets to be more of that technical. It gets to be more of that medical side that, I'm not a doctor on, but I wanted to touch a little bit on it. So, an example that I gave was like when somebody's always washing their hands, or when somebody has to go check and recheck everything, like did they turn the stove off? they unplug the iron, or all the doors locked. You know, that can be compulsive, and that can be obsessive at the same time. I got those backwards. I should have said obsessive compulsive. But like I said, we're not really going to get into that obsessive part because honestly, that's left up to those professionals, which you need to have if you suffer from that. They can help you identify, manage, and even treat those symptoms. When someone engages repeatedly in a behavior that is excessive, and despite the harmful consequences of doing so, it is referred to as a compulsive behavior. People who have this experience feelings unable to control their behavior, and so it can interfere with their daily activities and even their relationships. Remember how I joked a minute ago my dad called me a compulsive liar? Now I kind of understand that phrase, and I know what that word means now. I've given my testimony a whole bunch of different times. I've stood up on this stage at different times, and I've always shared the experiences about my brother, my father, growing up. And I was always jealous of my brother, and I was jealous of the relationship that him and my dad had. And I was also jealous of my friends and anybody that wasn't my last name. I was always jealous of them, and I always wanted what they had. So I started making up stories. I wanted to look cooler. I wanted to seem cooler. The fact is, I wasn't enjoying my life, so I started coming up with these stories. I started coming up with these elaborate tales that I had to kind of remember, because if I told one lie, I had to tell another lie to cover up that first lie, and then cover up those two lies with another lie, and it just snowballed. But I started making up these stories because I wanted to block out the fact that I did not enjoy my life, that at 15 and 16, I'd rather be anywhere else than on this planet. And I even continued lying into my late 20s. There was not one aspect of my life that I ever enjoyed, so I would just pretend. I wanted to be the center of attention. I wanted to be that guy that was Mr. Cool, that had everything together. Whether it was all a dumpster fire or not, I wanted to be that guy. And I would do anything and everything to be that way. I've always joked that if I ever wrote a book, the title of my book would be The Best Actor That Never Got to Hollywood. Because that's how much I thought I was good at lying. But that's how much I also believed my own lies. I told so many that it became truth to me, and I couldn't stop. And that's where the obsessive came in. I couldn't just stop. I was in too deep. So, compulsive behaviors are also usually unwanted, and they can cause distress. It's not also uncommon for people to experience other mental concerns like anxiety or depression. And I can say, like, when I was going through all that, when I was lying, when I wasn't being honest with myself, I was always depressed. Always. Even though I had everything together on the outside, on the inside, when I got home, it was just me. And I hated every minute of it. However, with the right treatment plan in place, we can discover the possibilities of getting over these compulsive behaviors. That can include therapy, it can include medication, and really it can include this room that we're in right now. So what is a compulsive behavior? Some think that a compulsive behavior is a form of an addiction, while others view it as being linked to difficulties with impulse control. Compulsive behaviors are related to and sometimes confused with other mental health conditions. Kind of in all that, when I said that I was living all those lies, I also drank when I smoked and I smoked when I drank. But I also did those to look cool. But I was also an alcoholic. But I wasn't telling anybody that. Because I thought I can get over it. I can put the bottle down tomorrow and be all right. When in reality, like if I put that bottle down for more than 10 seconds, I had the tremors. You know, again, I was telling so many lies, not just to myself, but to others, that I believed them. Compulsive behaviors are related to, I already said all that. There are many different types of compulsive behaviors. Some align more closely to our addictive behaviors. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that this can relate to recovery. And how is that so? Like a drug addiction, an obsessive compulsive disorder can leave people feeling isolated. Someone suffering from a compulsive disorder might have the behavior, I already got lost. Someone suffering from compulsive behavior might avoid important people and social settings to keep their obsessions and their compulsions private. This shame, this loneliness, and this physical isolation can easily lead to substance abuse. I also look at it this way. Going through my divorce, the way my divorce ended, I didn't feel comfortable with myself. I already had those issues growing up, but they were magnified more going through my divorce. Because ultimately, she's the one that cheated, and I'm the one that left and filed for divorce. But it was her action that made me feel less of a person. So, not only was I drinking more, but because I didn't feel like I was good enough, I turned to pornography. And that's a substance in its own. Because there's all those chemicals that run through our head that make us think different things and feel different ways, that it's not just easy to put down. There have been multiple studies on the subject, and one study found that individuals who have obsessive thoughts or compulsive behaviors for the first time in their childhood or early adolescence were more likely to abuse drugs or alcohol later in their life. Experience this as a child or as a teenager apparently isolated those individuals from their peers and caused significant psychological distress, which later led them to a substance abuse. And like I said, I've struggled with pornography. I've been an alcoholic. And I can attribute those to being part of my childhood. Because again, my dad and my brother got along so well, and I always felt like I was the adopted child. And joking aside, I always thought that I was because I didn't look like any like them. My dad was darker complected. He was, over 6 foot. My brother was darker complected. He was almost hitting 6 foot. And here I am, burning the minute I walk outside in the sun. And not 6 foot. Thanks for reminding me on that. Thank you. I appreciate that. I can't see you, but I'll make sure I find you after the service. No, I'm just kidding. One of the things that led me to pornography at a younger age was that my dad had those magazines, but he never hid them. He wanted to raise me and my brother completely different than he was raised. My dad was raised very military. They moved around quite a bit, so it was always very strict. No, 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 very little yeses. Always black or white, no gray area. So he always told me and my brother, if you guys are curious, you know where they are, don't hide them, put them back when you're done. But it was that first look, that first glance, that kind of was able to let me get away from all the things that I didn't feel like I was important with. And I would hide them. And then I'd get in trouble for hiding them, and I'd come up with a lie and try to cover it up, and you know how that went. I just kept telling lies on top of lies. So, I'm going to ask a question. You don't have to answer this, but this is just a question to think about. Is anyone ever obsessed with getting their next fix, or the next drink, or logging on to that next site? This is an obsession. This is where it ties into recovery. Because if you've ever done drugs, you've ever drank, you're always looking for that next thing that makes you feel good. You're always looking for that next thing that takes away the pain. That, for even just that brief second, helps you, even though it's not. Obsessions are frequent and forceful images, urges or thoughts that can cause the sufferer great distress or anxiety. The individual tries to ignore these obsessions and get rid of them with other thoughts or actions. And this is just performing another compulsion. Who's ever, again, that's another question, you don't have to answer this, but this is something I was thinking about. If you've ever struggled with drugs, you're like, well, maybe if I stop doing that when I drink it, it'll be okay. And you convince yourself of that. But then they go hand in hand. I may not have enough money to buy this, but I have enough money to go buy a beer. And so that's where you're just compounding the issue with another issue. And we've all learned that, replacing one bad habit with another bad habit's never going to get you anywhere unless it's the slammer. Guilty. When this circle starts spinning out of control, it is important to know the telltale signs that signal trouble is ahead. As with other types of addictions, you know you are in trouble when your behavior is controlling you rather than the other way around. What is the proverbial line in the sand between a bad habit and a compulsive behavior? One of the first clues is that you've lost control to stop. One of the easiest ways to decide if a behavior has become addictive is to ask yourself whether it has led to negative consequences and whether you have continued to do it in any way, shape, or form. While compulsive surfing at night or doing searches, that can sabotage both your sleep and your personal relationships. That was just the example that I used. You know, if you drink and you come home and you open a beer and you don't put one down until the minute you go to bed, that's still going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect your health. It's those things that we have to be mindful of. And it's easy to say, I am mindful of it. But is it really? Because we can tell ourselves, we can put it down, we can stop. But again, how many of us have put down that drug or that bottle and then picked it right back up 30 seconds later because we couldn't live without it? When is an addiction, it is really seriously impairing your life. It can affect it personally, professionally, spiritually, and even up here in the mind. Here are some questions to ask yourself and to check yourself whether it is an activity that is becoming an addictive behavior. I'm going to start off with shopping. Do you use shopping to get over your feelings? I don't. I like to shop, but it's just because I want cool stuff. But I don't use, this is just an example. I'm trying to cover different things. I know I've talked about my struggles, but another one is, if you're shopping, do you spend more than you can afford to support your behavior? So if I know I make X amount, but I love to shop and I'm spending Z, now I can't afford rent. So, am I lying to myself? Is that becoming a compulsive behavior? Please don't tell my boss. I'm not picking on her. I know you're over here texting her right now, he's talking about you. And if you're watching, I'm really not, I promise. Please don't fire me. Another question to ask yourself, and this one's not about shopping. This one's just in general. Do you feel guilty about your actions, and do you try to hide them? Because who's been guilty of being an alcoholic or being addicted to drugs or being addicted to pornography, and they try to hide it? If you don't raise your hand and it's not just those examples, but if you don't raise your hand, we got a great program on Monday nights that you guys need to come down to. Get over your hurts, habits, and hangups. Oh, wait, that's tonight. So, do you lie to others who don't know what you're doing? That was my biggest thing growing up. Even my biggest thing into my early 20s is I was lying to everybody. They didn't know any different. And if they did, they went along with it, unless you're my parents. Then they were trying to kick my behind. Is the behavior getting in the way of your personal and family relationships? Is your job at risk because of your behavior? And if my job's at risk because of the joke I made earlier, I'm sorry. Please don't be mad. I don't even know if she's watching, so I've completely turned off airplane mode on everything, so they can't text me. They can't do anything like they try to do every time I'm on stage, so good luck, guys. It's not working tonight. There was one I literally had to throw my watch over that way because they kept texting me all night long. Have you ever tried to stop and discovered that you just can't? I think most of us are guilty of that. Do you really use, well, this one's going back to the shopping one. I don't know why it's back in there, but it is. Do you really use what you buy? Or do you buy things and they remain packaged and hanging in the closet? I guess when I was typing that one out, I went back to my childhood and to who I considered my godmother. And there was a lot of things that built up to this, but I remember when she passed away and we went through her house, it was like a thrift store. If you loved Elvis and you loved collecting plates, she was your woman. QVC was her best friend. She had an issue. She didn't want to admit it. And so she tried at one time to have a garage sale to get rid of some of this stuff. But she was asking the same prices that she had paid for them and nobody was buying it. But she didn't want to admit that she had an issue. She didn't want to admit that she couldn't stop. So she got rid of everything, and you could finally walk through her house again until she picked that habit right back up. And so when she passed away and we're walking through this house, this podium was wider than most of the aisleways that you could walk through because she wasn't telling anybody. She was holding herself up. She was embarrassed. So it doesn't matter what you're struggling with. I've talked about the shopping. I've talked about the drugs, the alcohol, the pornography. It can be something as simple as, like we talked about, checking the doors 15 times to make sure they're locked. It can be as simple as your thoughts. And whose thoughts haven't ever been their worst enemy? So what do we do if we are struggling with some type of compulsive behavior? I'm going to say this because it's part of what we need to do, and I know that not everybody has the option to do this. But that's why we're so thankful on a Monday night that we have a counselor. We have multiple counselors on some Monday nights that we can talk to, that give their services to us free of charge to let us get some ideas of what we need to do in life. One of the most appropriate treatment plans depends on our type of behavior that we experience. In some cases, like I said earlier, medication and therapy may be the most effective way to cope with that. But if you're sitting here tonight, this can be your first step. You may not need the therapy. What you need is community. Because who hasn't been touched, who hasn't been helped, who hasn't learned something from somebody that stood on the stage, whether it's a lesson or a testimony, and got something out of it? I've shared this. When Jason stood up here for the first time, well, it's back there, but when Jason stood up on a stage for the first time and admitted what he was struggling with, I knew I wasn't alone. He opened the door for me to talk about what I struggled with. Because I'd stand up and be like, I struggled with alcohol, and walk away. But it took somebody bolder than me to share that, for me to share that, for other people to share that. Same thing if you've ever been abused. There's been multiple people that sit on this stage that talked about that. And that's what this is about. It's about community. It's the biggest thing. I've always, growing up, never was really in church and grew up Catholic, so we never had this type of setting. It was more of an exercise with the up, down, kneel, kneel, up, something, however it went. It was like a game code. But we never had this. And so for me to learn about a forever family, for me to learn about community, I didn't learn that until my late 20s and early 30s, and I'm still learning it now. But this is one of the best places that you can start learning about what you're struggling with, learning about those behaviors, learning how they can turn out to be more than just a little nuisance. I tried to say that word without stumbling. But remember, we're not here to fix you. We're not trained professionals. We're just here to share our experiences, to love you, to encourage you, to guide you, and be a sounding board if that's what you need. Another way that you can find out if you're struggling, and a lot of people are probably going to moan and groan about what I'm about ready to say, but you beat me to the punch. I heard journaling, and I was like, man, all right. So yes, journaling, but it's also doing a personal inventory. Knowing when you're struggling with something. Knowing what may trigger you. You don't have to be like, dear diary, today you don't have to do that. I don't do that. I started off with like, I got mad today. Or, it was a really good day. Or like tonight, I stressed halfway through the day. But at least I can keep patterns and I know what's going on. Because my mind is my own worst enemy 90% of the time. When I jokingly say that I struggle with Eloy, I struggle with Eloy. It's a lot of it up here. And there's some leaders that can say it's just all of you that we struggle with every day, so it's okay. But I see that. I'm just kidding. But it's okay to journal. If you don't want to call it journaling, then call it your inventory. But take notes. Look for patterns. Look for triggers. I've kind of jokingly talked about it, but recovery, small groups. If you're struggling with drugs or alcohol, it's okay to go to an AA or an NA. Go someplace where you know others are struggling with you. And the biggest thing is share. I know you may not want to share in your first time. Lord knows I didn't. I was here because there was a hot meal and I was hungry. And as soon as that service was over, I was out the door. Now look at me, blabbering. But be around people. Don't isolate. Don't hide. Because that's when you're more vulnerable. That's when you're more likely to take a drink, take some pills, whatever it is. The other one, find somebody that you can trust that can be your accountability partner or a sponsor. And when they talk, listen. Because they may have gone through the same things. And if you find one, hopefully they have gone through some of the same things, or they know somebody that can, so they can lean on them and say, I know what you're going through. Here's somebody that can help you. But if they call you out on your stuff, don't get mad. Right, Burgess? Huh? See, you weren't paying attention. Nah, don't even try. So, but don't be upset if they call you out. They do it out of love. They don't do it out of any other thing. They want to see you succeed. They want to see you get through that. Because the more you give into any of those compulsions, the worse it gets until what started off as a pastime has become that addiction. And that addiction comes with serious consequences. Some of them life-threatening. You know, I've shared about being an accountability partner and losing them. First time that I've ever lost somebody because they didn't feel comfortable sharing. They were hiding. Don't give in. Luckily, I've given you some warning signs that can help you alert to when that habit is becoming a compulsion. If you follow Pastor Jeff on Facebook, he has some really great wisdom at like 4 o'clock in the morning when he's getting ready for the gym. I don't see it till about 6 o'clock when I wake up and roll out of bed trying to rush to work. But he gave a really good one yesterday that kind of ties in with that first scripture that I shared earlier. What he shared yesterday was, if you tell the truth, it becomes part of your past. But if you lie, it becomes part of your future. And I feel like that's so true. Because if we don't be honest with ourselves, first and foremost, we're not just lying to ourselves, we're lying to God, which he knows we're lying, but we're lying to the people that love us, that care about us, that want better for us. And that future can go one of two ways. You can use your life, or you can gain your life. And any one of us leaders that stands up on this stage and talks, the one thing that we want for everybody is for you to gain a life. We're not up here because we want to. We're up here because we need to. We've had leaders before us that have shared their experiences, their struggles, that have helped us. And we get to pay that forward. And a lot of us don't take that lightly. I see it in every one of these leaders here, what they take home with them because of who they care about, which is every single one of y'all in here. And a couple of y'all watching online. I'm kidding, all of y'all watching online. We care about your future. We care about you as a person. So I'm going to end with this. And it comes out of Romans 12. Don't copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. Thanks for letting me blabber. Thanks for watching online. Hopefully I've taught y'all something. If not, sorry. Thank y'all.